Hello and welcome once again to City Salvo's little blog that we are doing every couple of times a week now during this COVID-19 period. I'm here along with my wife Sarah, as you know, and we are just wanting to share with you a little bit about what we've picked up from this week's passage, which is looking at Acts 1, 12 through to 26. And so Sarah, what have you found? What have you seen?
Well, all the way through this discipleship experiment, we sort of really focus on just reading the passage and figuring out what the passage is trying to tell us, right? And why we're doing this together this week is because as we both read through it and what we're learning from other people's experiences and Bible studies of this, you learn different things about it, and you learn what is God telling me is quite different to what God is telling somebody else. So when I first read this passage, which is about the disciples choosing a replacement for Judas, it talks a bit about what Judas did and all that sort of stuff. We can go into a theological conversation about that another day. But what I really liked it was just that real focus on prayer, that they joined together constantly in prayer, women and men together, and doing it all together. And when they had to make a big decision, they smothered it in prayer. They prayed, then they finalized their decision, then they prayed some more to make sure that what they were doing was what God wanted of them to do. And that's what I got out of this, which is quite different to what you were thinking.
Yeah, I mean, initially when I read it, I was concentrating on the fact that they had to choose another person. And there was the power of the small group and of doing it together and sharing the workload that Christ was asking them to fulfill as part of their mission. But in reading it now, there's the real heavy importance on the Word of God. It talks about in verse 20, as it was written in the Psalms, we're going to do this because these things were given to us as an instruction, so we're going to follow them out in faith. And so that, with the Word and with prayer, you see the boldness that starts to build within them, and then the confirmation that happens at Pentecost in a few days' time from this passage. Really seems to affirm who they are as believers, and also what Jesus' mission for them and for the rest of the disciples and for us is meant to be, and how his church will now look because of that.
It's again because they are building to those Pentecost events. They might not know it at this point, but we know in hindsight that those events of Pentecost just launched the believers, the Christian church, out into the world in amazing ways, full of power and acts and miracles and preaching and martyrdom and amazing things done in and for his name. So these sorts of passages are important because they're setting those up. And for Shane and I know thinking through this about leadership, about discipling, about prayer, is how are we setting up ourselves? How are we helping to set up this church to how God is going to use it and launch it through this coronavirus time? So it's really challenging to read some of these passages and to grow like these disciples did, and then hopefully see what God does through us in it. So
There's a clear expectation on this passage that they choose one of the 12, or choose another to replace, to become part of the 11 disciples or apostles. That they choose from somebody who's been with them along this whole journey. And there's a sense that actually we're not going to choose someone from outside. We're not going to choose someone who's just showing up and who might be talking the great language or fantastic, but we're going to find somebody who is growing and who has the proof that they have changed because of what Christ has done for them in their lives. There's a real they're looking for a real evidence-based leadership, and they're wanting people to lead from that change so that change will then influence others. They're not looking for fly-by-nighters, but people who have done the hard yards and are prepared to walk, I guess,
faithful,
in that faith that Christ is and God has been given to them.
So throughout this week, those thoughts will continue to mull along you in terms of the leadership of our people and rising up those amongst our church who have been ordained and chosen by God. And I will continue to smother the entire thing in prayer and ensure that for me, that the decisions that I make, that the plans I have, that anything that I need to go forward with, that I'm going to smother it in prayer. So as we've mentioned, we've both got different things out that we're going to work on during this week, different ways that we're going to focus and be challenged and come back to. But I'm really excited about Pentecost. It's a beautiful birthday of the church. And like members of our church can't have their birthdays out in public, public at the moment. Our Pentecost is going to be definitely private. It's going to be definitely personal. But we know that the Word of God doesn't stay there, and it spreads far beyond what we can even possibly imagine. So.
Absolutely. We've got, talking about leadership, though, we do have a local leadership meeting on Sunday. And so if you're watching this before then,
smother it in prayer.
It'd be really lovely if you guys could smother that in prayer, because during that time we're going to discuss and at least start to have some really more in-depth and more robust conversations as to how we go back and how we start to meet together safely and what things we want to launch first and do as City Salvos. And I mean, we're already, working to grow God's kingdom, but being able to meet face to face is certainly a lot more fun. So we're going to be talking about that. We've also done a 10 at 10 with 10 people that we invite, because here in South Australia we're allowed to have 10 people with 1.5 metre spacing and things like this. And so we've had, I think we had 8 the first week that we invited to come along, and then I think we had 6 or 7 last week. And so we'll keep doing that and connecting people and hearing from them what's going on and wanting to hear how God is growing them. And the power of even a small group meeting together has been really significant. So
and we want to
look out for that.
Yeah, we want to hear from some of you in these videos too. So we may be knocking on your door and trying to find out what God has been telling you through this time, because we are a priesthood of all believers. We are in this together, and God's going to do amazing things. So until then, until our next video, have a great week.
Yeah, God bless, guys. See ya.
Ya.